All right, guys, we're live. I'm going to throw a link to the first part of my walkthrough of this Peacefield Estate here in chat. So if you guys are following along with me live, you can always look at the YouTube live chat, and the link should be in there for you. And it should bring you to the first part. We essentially built everything from with this building from the first floor up, and included doors and windows and whatnot. And from that part, I have additionally worked on a few more things, like adding the roof geometry, reconstructing some of the windows and adding them up to the second level. And there's quite a bit left to do here, so I wanted to continue on with the second part of this. And we're going to work on the second floor and essentially build up to a point where we have a complete exterior visualization to work with, and then I can go into the nitty-gritty details and add the interior doors, everything as far as aesthetic qualities for the kitchen, the cabinets, the furniture, and any placement of any internal materials as we need them. So let's go through here and just take a brief gander at what I've included. We had a second floor loft, an enclosed section with its own roof, its own windows, and there will eventually be a staircase up, so I need to add that in eventually as well. So I basically worked around the roof around the rear of the building here. There's if you can see here on my plans as I have them laid out here on the reference planes, there's a concrete patio on the exterior. I need to add some posts, I need to add the concrete padding in, and of course any hand railings and geometry that might need to be added on along with it. So that's another part that needs to be accomplished here, as well as the section that branches the house to the pre-existing structure, which is currently a standing shed that has 2 levels in it, and we're converting that into potentially a 3-car garage or a 3-door garage. So that kind of geometry will need to be figured out after the fact. This is just going to give us our orientation with the land as we've cleared it. So let's see, where should we start here? Actually, first thing I want to do, first thing I'd like to do is link this into Facebook so you guys can actually see it from everybody who's in my contacts list. So give me just a second, I'll post that. If I can find the link. Let's see. Just bear with me one moment here. I'm just going to grab the link and throw that into Facebook so anybody who's interested among my friends list can preview it and follow along. Okay. All right, so that link is up in Facebook for everybody who is part of my friends list who want to follow along with the live stream, and you guys can jump into the YouTube live chat and drop some questions in there if you are interested in finding anything out particular about what I'm working on, or where the project is going, or essentially how something is done, and I'll be able to go through it with you as I move through the process here. Okay, so one of the first things I wanted to do was close in the front of this building. I do have a side view of the building here I want to close out real quick. I believe that is the left side building. Yeah, I'll just hide that so we don't have to deal with that. So I can view this from a couple more angles. I have the rear of the house and the front of the house set up so that we can move around the model as we wish and see through some of those reference planes. So I had set this model up looking at the front of the model. You can see everything is pretty much lined up here with our reference plans. And the first floor goes up to, I believe it's 10 feet, 1 7/8 inches into the second floor trusses for the loft above it on the second floor. So everything down below, everything down on the first floor, I actually want to keep separated from the second floor so that when we're walking through this model together, I can just easily select everything from the second floor geometry and take a look at everything on the first floor, or vice versa, slap the second floor on there and see everything in its whole. So I want to build the second floor geometry, the walls and the floors and everything separated from this geometry. I'm not just going to continue everything moving up, but in order to get base level geometry, I need to extend it from the existing walls. So I have to look through a couple of my reference images momentarily, and I can get a better idea of how this geometry actually extrudes up. So give me a second here while I look off screen. I just need to find out where these walls extend from. And I'll see if I can't drag this over here on screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at. So this is the second floor wall layout. Basically everything here in the thicker wall geometry is the wall that completes everything up to the top of the loft. And then everything inside of this geometry, so right, this L section here and this one here that wraps around into the stairwell will be solid wall geometry. It means it goes all the way up to the ceiling. So I have to plan this out properly in order to figure out how this fits into my open space right now. It's just a void. So let's see, everything that goes up to the roof here and everything in here. There's an inset. So I think from the inset up, if we go back to our geometry here, from the inset up, so everything from this external wall, right, the one I have selected, up is completely solid wall. So one of the things I can do to prepare this for myself, there are no doors or windows on the second floor on this entire left side. If we look back at these plans from the top down, this is completely enclosed. Everything here is completely enclosed. And you can see that this geometry here is a balcony railing, but the internal geometry here is actually a completed wall. There's no way to look down from those positions in order to see something below it. Otherwise, you would, going back to the 3D model here, you'd be looking down at floor geometry. So I'll have to play with that when we get up to the second floor. But in order to start working on my wall geometry, all I actually have to do here is, actually, you know what, let's take this section because it's inside the building. I'll take this wall section. Let's see, we can grab polygons and you get rid of it. And I'll grab the working border here and just extrude that vertically until it meets the ceiling, or until it meets the roof geometry. And this way it gives me a decent amount of, it gives me a decent understanding of where the exterior wall geometry on the second floor goes out to. It'll expand out to a certain point. And I cut a hole in it, so the top of that is fine. What I can do is grab all these polygons, since it's part of the geometry below it, and what I said before was that we want to keep the first floor geometry and the second floor geometry separated so I can actually disconnect them later on when we're looking around the plans. So I can just grab the top section of this and detach it completely, and this will become the base for our second floor wall geometry. So you say I detach that. So here you have your second floor wall, and below it is the first floor wall that we extruded this geometry from. So I can take this, I'm going to attach this to second floor. Let's call this second floor geometry. Let's just do geo. So whenever I click on the second floor geometry selection set, I can just hide everything on the second floor and leaves me with everything on the first floor. And I want to keep the roof here so that I can see my limitations of where the walls go up to, and it just makes it easier for me to work with that geometry later on. Because I extracted that first wall section from a pre-existing wall section on the first floor, I had to cut a hole in it in order to get the geometry to extrude properly. So I can just grab the let's see, border of this wall and cap it back up, so that when you're looking at it from the top down, when you're not inside the ceiling, you see completed walls. You don't just see voids in the wall geometry. So that's just a nice little touch that helps us as we go through the walkthrough process. And now I can bring my second floor wall back. And what I want to do is from a side view, because this goes up into the roof, I can grab my, let's see, vertices. And just move these up and down as I need them. And since they're penetrating the roof geometry, it really doesn't matter where these show up. It's just the fact that they don't stick through the ceiling or stick through up the roof on the exterior of the house like this. So I'll just reset that, go to my top level, and go back to my 3D perspective. And what I can do is just select all of these verts, drag them across, and now I'm creating my second floor wall geometry as you see it here. Now this is all enclosed. The front, you see how these windows are just kind of hovering here on the front. The front fascia of the house will literally come up right to where the window sills are, and everything on, you see this little pocket here, the pocket with the 3 windows, the double doors, this is enclosed. There's like an overhang. So the topmost geometry is going to move all the way back. So I can just drag this all the way back and line this up as is. This will all be enclosed, so I'm not really worried about some of this exterior wall showing up. So I'll just bring this back to maybe here, and that should do it for that side. And then I'll do the same exact thing for this section of wall, and move this all the way back and approach it from a rear view. And I should be able to line this up. This may be easier in the side view. Okay, maybe not so easy in a side view. I can take my roof geometry and I can make it see-through so we can see everything that's occurring. Let me go back there. Change my properties so that I can see through it. Hope that works. Let's see. I can kind of see through it. It should be good enough. Let's grab my vertices, and you'll see how I have these red lines in my top view where they line up with the windows, and I can just kind of put that in the middle because that's going to be hidden from our view once the front and rear of the house are buttoned together. So I'll leave that as is for one side, for the left side of the loft area. You'll see there's a void here above the door, above the windows. These are actually, these two pockets here are supposed to be bookcases or display cases with shelving or cabinets, however you wanted to set those up. But there's will be some wall geometry, some ceiling geometry underneath this, so I'll have to put that in there later. Just make a mental note that that stuff is sitting there and open. But that looks pretty good. So that's one wall for the left side of the loft. And I can go to the top level with this. Now I can't exactly do the same thing on the other side because we have the stairwell that's open from the side of the ceiling. But what I can do is copy the geometry. I can literally, let's see, I can mirror this object. I'll make a copy and I'll hit OK, and then I'll just drag this over so it fits into place. I'll have to look at this from the side view again so everything matches up. And I'm going to center the object pivot so that I can manipulate it easier on this screen. So I'll move it in. Then my 3D view, I can quite literally just match everything up to the wall underneath it. What I may end up doing is snapping the pivot to one of the vert points. And what that allows me to do is actually line it up. Oops. I can line this geometry up with the walls underneath it like that. And get rid of my snap selection. So now I have two interior walls, and I'm going to have to cut a hole cut a hole into my right side wall because that's where the stairwell comes up through. But already you can see we're able to visualize the space on the second floor. So I'll leave that as is for now. I have to do a lot of cutting in for the roof and for that new wall geometry, and once we're inside we'll be able to make more sense of the workable space in there, what connects to what. So I want to do my front fascia. This will be a little bit more difficult because I'll need to connect two sections of wall geometry in order to get my second floor geometry extruded properly. So let me select one and I'll attach the other side wall. So that should look fine as is. And then I can select the top portion of these walls, delete them completely, grab the borders, so that's two separate border sections, and then drag those up slightly to about there. and then I can go back to polygons. I think this may be easier from the front view. There we go. So I'll grab those polys, go back in my 3D view, and I need to detach this geometry. And this now becomes my second floor wall for the front fascia of the house. And so top level, grab this geometry, and from my selection set, I can just add that to, that was second floor geo. So right click and add selected objects. So that the next time I click on second floor geo, the selection set, it'll have all of those selected with it. I have to add this piece as well, so second floor geo, paste, add selected object, and now let's see. So now that's part of the entire selection set. Alright, so obviously we don't want these front fascia walls to be so low, because it needs to be a completely enclosed house. That's ultimately our end goal here. And for the second floor, there's really no other rooms or partitions. You see this like triangular void here. There's really nothing else in there. It's just empty space or attic space or whatever that ends up being. We can close that in completely. So I have all these edge segments. Here, I'll show you from the front view. I have these edge segments here, and I can just go ahead and get rid of these. I just want to make sure I'm not selecting geometry that I don't need. That looks okay. There we go. Select the edge, delete, select the vertices, delete. Now I have one solid section here that I can manipulate the verts by themselves and create more accurate geometry for what we're trying to do. I can also create a split here because this is eventually going to need to move up with the roof line. So maybe that's what I'll end up doing first before we move the geometry up. No, I'll close it in first, just so we can see what's going on here. So from the front view, I'll move this up into the roof geometry, right? We just want to tuck it in and hide it. So I can take my edges here, select all my edges, and now we can create a slice vertically. Let's reset it and see if we can't. A nice vertical slice plane. Move that into position where we need it to intersect with this corner, this little elbow, and then I'll slice that away. Go to my verts, and I can pull this back down and create my elbow geometry for that second floor wall. So this seems like it's a little bit up in there too, so I'll pull that down, and now we do the same thing on the other side. Grab my edges, the ones I don't need, grab the vertices that we can get rid of, and just delete those as we go through here. This comes down a little bit there, and this will go up about there, and then create my slice plane and just drag it over here on this side. Alright, so about halfway into the elbow, hit slice, and now I have new vertices that I can manipulate our new shape. So that's it for the front fascia section. I also have to make the center portion of it. Right, so we've already blocked in a good percentage of the second floor, but this fascia goes across the front. It doesn't follow the first floor exterior wall geometry because there's a ceiling, like an overhang. See where it says concrete patio, right? This goes directly over it. So what we want to do is connect these two pieces of geometry. They're actually one piece because I created them together. So what I can do is just get rid of the outside polys of each of these, delete, and with my border tool, I can bridge these two pieces of geometry together, even though they're one piece. And sometimes you see it gets kind of whacked out. It doesn't know how to handle the bridge geometry. So the other thing I can do is go to the top level, convert it to an editable poly again, and see if that helps. Try to, reset the geometry as we see it. Let's hope that does something for us. Grab my borders, bridge, and just hope I'm clicking on the right sections here. No, still same thing. So the other thing, another way to avoid this would be go to edges. Instead of trying to fiddle with it individually, I can just bridge in independent edges to each other. Let's see, maybe that'll work. That one to that one, and that one to that one. There we go. So that works better for us. And then the bottom piece, we want to close that in, make sure it's one whole solid piece. All right, and then the other thing I can do is actually right click. Nah, I'm not going to worry about that now. I was going to close in the bottom side of the geometry so we don't really get this flickering that happens when those two lines intersect. See where the red overlaps the white. So I'm going to avoid making some changes there. But I can take this border. Oops. Ooh, interesting. So what I have now is, because this is an incomplete shape and I'm trying to select a border edge, since they're not all connected, I'm not able to just select the top piece of geometry. So this tells me that I should isolate my object. Now this is the front fascia of the wall. And I can come back in here and I can just bridge all of this together if I need to. So for a game artist, this wouldn't exactly be healthy, because you have polygons inside the geometry that get tucked inside of other geometry that nobody's ever going to see. And the game engine would end up having to render those polygon surfaces, even though they're not, facing your field of view or your camera. And that is not a well optimized environment asset. So I'm doing a very bad thing here in the field of game design, but for architectural rendering and seeing things on different levels, it works pretty well. So now what I can do is view my geometry here and select the border. Now when I select the border, it's only going to grab this top half, and it just makes it that much easier for me to extrude the roof geometry. Or not the roof geometry, but the geometry of the front fascia of the building. So from a front view, I'll line this up and I'll center it with the lower half of my roof. And this is the really cool part here, is since it's a triangle and I just extruded a giant rectangle, we want the points to merge right in the middle. So the easiest way to do this is to go to Edge. I can select both the front and the back edge. And where is my handy collapse? Here we go, collapse. Boom. And that will actually tuck, it will collapse the vertices on either side of those edges that I had selected, and it will bring them together to the center. So just with one easy click of the button, I was able to center all that geometry. And it's all tucked inside the roof, so you really don't see any of it. Now, the real problem here is that I need to cut out portholes for the windows to, actually see through from the second floor exterior to the interior. So I can just grab my polygons, and let's hope this works. Let's see, grab these maybe, and see if I can't do a slice plane, vertical slice plane. Let's reset it. Get this vertical, there we go. And I can move these into position, again, center them over the, basically center of the framework of the window. And I can just slice my additional edges into place. Let's try to make quick work of this. Slice, slice, slice. And then I can do it for the horizontal components here. One there. And then one more down here. Right where the window sill is. Leave that out there. Alright, so that gives me all the polygon faces that I need to just click on and hit delete, and there we go. So now these windows in our three-dimensional view are see-through. Let's see if I can make this easier to view. Let's go by vertices maybe. There we go. So the inside geometry, you see the back faces of the geometry. It's very hard to see because we're looking through the window geometry, the glass geometry. And because you're looking at the back face of a polygon, it's just see-through. It doesn't render at all. And this would actually be the case in a game engine because it's the back face. It doesn't know how to render it, so it would render it black. So if you ever had to look through these windows, you'd just be seeing a black face. You would be looking into a non-textured surface, essentially. So you just want to make sure you're doctoring all of your walls from every angle in 3D geometry or a 3D space in order to see these the way you want to see them. So that worked out pretty well on this side. Pretty well on this side. Let's see. So it looks pretty good. Top level. Now if we look at the front of this building, the front fascia is completed. And all we really have to worry about is the ceiling geometry down here. So there's two ways we could think about doing the ceiling geometry. We don't really need to make it a complex process. What we can actually do is create a plane. Let's see, would I be seeing this from the top side, or is that closed in? So that's another question I'd have to ask myself is, would we actually see the floor of this? And the answer is no, because the loft encompasses the top section of this overhang. So this being the front of the building, right, these are the two tempered windows on the second floor, and the overhang would be just about here. Since it's inset and the ceiling geometry isn't really going to be viewed from the bottom floor, oops, there we go. What I can do is just grab a plane, right, just a simple polygon surface, and create this shape here. And drop my segments and move it over slightly so it's centered. Something like that. And this isn't two-sided geometry, so what I want to keep in mind is that you see how the Z, my controller is Z up, which means the normals, the face of this plane that I just created is faced upwards. Since we're not going to be seeing it from the second floor, from the loft, we're actually going to be seeing it from the entryway, this overhang here. I need to rotate it upside down, and that's just a safety, so that when we see this geometry later, it's not going to be a black void, like I said before. You're looking at the back face of a polygon, and it won't make much sense to the human eye. doesn't really make much sense to the renderer either. So I'll just bring that down like that, and that becomes our ceiling geometry, and I'll leave that hanging open. The other thing is, I believe the exterior here, there's some sort of frame or edging around the outside of this overhang. So I can add that in real quick. Let's see, how can I do this quick and easy? I'll create a box at this corner. Let's just create something here. And we'll do 7 inches by 7 inches. There we go. And there you go. So that's perfectly square geometry in my X and Y dimensions. And just to make this little overlapping framework here, I'll pull this out as I see fit, and then I can just stretch that into place. Let's go to about there. And if I wanted to, I can just copy this geometry and move it over to the other side and make sure that that's in place as accurately as we need it to be. That looks pretty good. And this just frames off the overhang from the front of the house. So I want to attach these two pieces of geometry together, convert to editable poly, and I will attach the first one I made. And this way I can go to my edges, select all of these edges, and then from the side view I can slice the geometry so I can extrude the overhang. Grab that polygon and that one and delete them. And then from the border, right from our border selection, I can just bridge this side to this side. And quick and easy, easy peasy. It's just the way we like it here. I'll grab these edges. Let's see, if I collapse the edges there, what I'll end up having to do is target weld the edges. So I'll make sure edges are selected, and I should be able to target weld my edges together. No, it's not going to let me. So I can go to vertices, and I'll just do it that way. And this will give me that nice 45-degree angle, like something you would see in your edge molding for a window or a door, or your crown molding in the kitchen area. And it's hard to do this with all the other geometry in the way. So what I'm going to do is isolate it, which means I get to see this one piece and this piece alone. Go back to my verts, target weld each of these corners into place. So for anybody who really doesn't follow through with the 3D geometry or how this stuff is put together, it's not going to make much sense unless you kind of watch this stuff, this kind of stuff made frequently. Handcrafting 3D geometry is a lot different than assorting some pre-mades or some pre-made tool sets for some of the designer programs, like 2020 allows you just to snap in a prefabricated set of cabinets and walls and windows which doesn't always conform to, to the projects you're working on. So you might not even be able to make a house like this in the 2020 software unless it was handcrafted geometry, which is the case we're working with here. So that we can actually drop this geometry a bit more. Right, this is the inside of that overhang, and that becomes the ceiling of the overhang. So that's a completed surface. Now, since I don't want this visible, I don't really want this visible when we're just seeing the first floor. So I can add this to my second floor geometry set, just so it's part of a set, and it will disappear when I decide to hide the second floor geometry. So essentially I could just grab second floor geometry and hide, and now all you see is that first floor. I think it's kind of nice to have this border molding here, but you could always add that to like aesthetics or additional assets that don't really need to be viewed from your planning side of seeing these plans. I have the floor geometry here that I don't really want visible, so I'll hide that. I like to see through to the floor plans below it. And I'll save this really quick because I would consider that quite a hefty amount of work. And if I was to lose that, I would just, even though it was a little under 20 minutes of creating that fascia geometry and the inside walls for the second floor, it's, you can already see how much work went into it, and I could easily make it a second time, but losing an hour work is never fun. So what are we working on next here? We have the second floor geometry, interior walls. We have the front of the house that is now modeled. I'll bring that stuff back. I'm gonna hide my edge faces so you can see it as a whole piece. Looks pretty cool from underneath. Right, my roof is still see-through, but that is actually helping me figure out when I look down through the model, it helps me figure out like this interior stairwell. I'm eventually going to have to cut into the roof geometry to have this connect to the second floor. And I'll eventually want to have all the roof geometry connected as well. Actually, I'll do that real quick. I'll take this geometry and this geometry and this and even the overhang for the back. And I'll select this and I'll add that to my roof selection set. And this way, if I ever needed to see through the roof at any given point, I can just select my roof geometry. Right, select roof, and I could hide, or I could freeze it, or however we wanted to reveal that. This second floor geometry I haven't separated yet, which I didn't even think about while I was creating these exterior walls with the windows and everything. So that's something I want to do. I could probably do this really quick here. Let's see. I'll grab my polygons. I need to add an edge loop in here so that I can just select the second floor separately. I can actually detach the geometry. So I'll grab all the polygons around this, do a slice plane, reset it, look at it from a side view, and just try to match this up with the height of the first floor, which should be somewhere about there. We'll just zoom in here and make sure we're on point. That looks about good. I can slice it. And I can take all the polys from the second floor geometry here in my 3D view. And I'll just do a marquee selection. Maybe this is better from the side view. Just do a marquee selection here. And I can detach and make it its own object. Once I have that done, I can add this top section to my second floor geometry selection set. So that way when I grab second floor geometry, I can hide all of that as well. And now all I'm left with is the first floor geometry for the walls and whatnot. So that, again, when you're walking through the model, if you ever had to show anybody, particular space just on the first floor, you can cut through, like essentially make cross-section models. So it makes it easier to walk through with somebody. So here, I want to connect my edges. So I'll just bridge. This may be difficult to figure out because I have two sides to everything here. Let's see. Right. Again, if there's too much other geometry in the way, I'll just isolate the selection. And it helps me see my edges. Something the Sims can't do. Yeah. Alright, so Danielle mentioned The Sims. That's basically a construction kit. You're creating a tool that will procedurally generate walls and apply textures and doors and windows and other assets to those walls, and makes it so much easier to move around and make actual dimensions for floor plans for a building. But in our case, it's not as simple as that. So we have to go through and do each one of these steps, and eventually you get something that's usable or viewable to somebody who really doesn't know what they're looking at or doesn't know how to work in the space. So again, just connect all these pieces. And that's my first floor wall geometry, and I also have my second floor. So I'll get rid of that. And eventually I'll add all the windows and stuff to their own selection set on the second floor, so we can just cut it, make the cross section like a cutout. So you can go through one step at a time. Here I have my walls that don't have these edges buttoned up, and you'll see I actually missed one of these polygons. Yeah, I have a polygon that's hanging open here. So I guess that never joined up with the second floor. So that kind of worries me. I'll have to go into the second floor geometry, bring that back up. Let's go to this guy and isolate it. And it's closed in, right? That little fin that was popping up, I already closed that section in, so I'm not too worried about that. But on the first floor, I can grab my polys, go back to my edges, and those edges should the edges should match from one side to another. It makes it a lot easier just to grab the geometry by its border. And let's see. Actually, I'll just do it like this. Select my edges and I'll bridge everything. That's good there. That's good there. That's good there. That's good there. All right, so that's all done. Let's see. Oh, sorry guys, I accidentally had the mic off for quite some time there. So essentially what I did is I just closed in the rear of the house, second floor wall, the exterior fascia just above the overhang in the roof. And I dumped all that geometry onto the second floor selection set along with the roof geometry. So that way if you ever wanted to, like a construction set, you can select all of the geometry from the second floor and just pop it off like it's like a dollhouse. You can essentially look at everything inside. Once I have the loft geometry for the second floor, I can either have that on its own selection set or attach it to the second floor so you don't see it afterwards. So that will essentially conclude my live walkthrough of creating the Peacefield Estate. So I'll try to get another one of these live streams out sometime this week, and close off all of the other exterior geometry. There's a couple of doors that need to be slotted in here, and the walls need to be buttoned up. And then I'm going to put the doors on the interior as well, so that give us more of an understanding of the space as we're walking through the inside of it. But I also have to create the steps. Let me undo that. If we look at it from the top down, everything leading up to the second floor I'd like to get completed. So there's the steps that lead up to the second floor here. And then if we look at our image of our second floor, we have this balcony, our catwalk all over to the loft. There's some close-in wall geometry here that I need to play around with and make sure it's all closed off properly. And then, of course, include the balcony railings. I'm going to take another look at the overhang at the rear of the house. So let's see, go back here. I'll visit the concrete patio and putting in the vertical posts for the supporting structure of the overhang. There's still quite a bit to do here. After that, it's all the aesthetics, the interior aesthetics being the toilets, the tubs, the sinks, again, the interior doors, the cabinet setup, kitchen cabinets, refrigerator, stove area. There's a couple of casework storage units here. Like I said, the shelves or display cases. There's a couple in the master bedroom as well. One of the ideas that's been passed around is a wood burning stove in direct replacement of this direct vent gas fireplace. So instead of it being a built-in structure, it's going to be a standalone wood burning stove structure that will be in here. That will consider a more complex task later on, because I need to find some point of reference to create the model for it, and then we can just slide that into place. Most of the rest of this is pretty straightforward, just open space and sinks, and just setting all the geometry where we figure out it needs to go. Aside from that, I also have the garage. So if I wanted to go into a bit more extreme detail here, I can flesh out the garage geometry, add the windows in there, add the actual garage doors, make them look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And then I can work on stuff like molding and, crown and floor molding. Really go into extreme detail here as to how this is all going to look when it's completed. The end game would be some sort of exterior yard work and putting trees and foliage into place and creating more of a homier feel to the exterior of the structure. And after that, I don't know, the opportunity is endless here. So I'll leave you with that. Look forward to my next live stream, should be sometime this week. Look for Facebook when I post that, and make sure to go check out more of my projects at brycestruck.com, and I'll see you next time.